If you have a Bible, you can turn to James chapter 3. You know, the goal each week as we go through the Scripture, I'm just going to share with you, I've got basically a couple of goals as a pastor and a preacher. One is that I want to understand the text. So as we go through James, I want to know what it means. Like, you know, God, you authored this book. What does this mean for me? What does it mean for us? What did it mean then, and what does it mean now? So that's really priority, right? We want to know, God, what are you saying through this text? The second priority is that I have to live it. I mean, it's not quite right, you know, to say, okay, let's teach this text, but then you don't seek to live it. That's the hard part. And I'm just going to confess to you that this is a text that I think that I've gained some understanding this week in my study. But this sermon is as much for me as it is for anybody. So I'm just going to confess that straight up, that there are some things here that I'm going to say to you that I need to implement in my own life, and I'm working on that. So let's read the text together. It's James chapter 3, verses 13 through 18. Who is wise and understanding among you? Let him show it by his good life, by deeds done in the humility that comes from wisdom. But if you harbor bitter envy and selfish ambition in your hearts, do not boast about it or deny the truth. Such wisdom does not come down from heaven, but is earthly, unspiritual, of the devil. For where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you find disorder and every evil practice. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is first of all pure, then peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. So we've been looking at James now for several months. And as we continue this book, here's kind of the big theme of James. If you're new with us, this might be helpful. And just to refresh those who have been walking through this book for several weeks now, a few months. James is really all about helping us to do more than profess our faith. It's all about possessing our faith. And that's the big difference. James is about, okay, there are many people who profess a faith. Even the demons we saw in James chapter 1. Even the demons can profess a faith. They know intellectually about God. There's a big difference between a profession of faith and a possession of faith. And so all of this is about, God, how does this become part of my life? How does this become part of who I am? Like, it's deep in my bones. I live this out on a daily basis. That's what this entire book is about. And today, that is true, especially as it relates to wisdom. So let's try to define wisdom from what we just saw. There are basically, I think, what I can see here is three components of wisdom. And here's the first one, is that wisdom is seeing all of life from God's perspective. To be able to see all of life from God's perspective. We saw in verse 15, for example, that there is an earthly wisdom from below. It's defined as unspiritual. It's actually defined as of the devil, or your translation might have demonic. So this wisdom that we're talking about is a wisdom from God's perspective, because there is an earthly sort of wisdom, but there's also called a wisdom from heaven in verse 17, the wisdom from above. And the two are vastly different. And so I want us just to think about the difference between wisdom from above and wisdom from the earth, and to use an example from 1 Samuel chapter 13 in the Old Testament will help us do that. So let me just frame this up just for a moment. We're not going to linger here, but in the Old Testament, King Saul is the leader of Israel. And they are in a battle, getting ready to experience a battle, and the Philistines are coming against them with 3,000 chariots, 6,000 charioteers, and soldiers as numerous as the sand on the seashore. So there's a big battle that's coming their way. And it says that the Israelite army is hard pressed. If you're looking here, it's 1 Samuel 13, verse 6. The army was hard pressed, and so they started hiding. It says they hid in caves and thickets, among the rocks and in pits and cisterns. And so basically they're hiding, they're fleeing, they're running away, and they don't know what to do. And Saul is the leader. And he's got to figure this out. What are we going to do? My people are running away. It says the troops were quaking with fear. This opposition is mounting and his people are running. Well, Samuel had told Saul, Samuel the prophet and the priest had told Saul, the king, wait 7 days. I will come back and I will offer a sacrifice on your behalf. And this is a very important part of this, that they would meet with God in order to meet the needs that they were getting ready to face. Well, Samuel doesn't show up. 7 days pass. And so Saul takes matters into his own hands. And it says he made the offering. And just as he made the offering, the sacrifice, then Saul sees Samuel coming to greet him. But Saul had already disobeyed God's law and Samuel's instruction. He did not wait quite long enough. And so Samuel asked Saul, "What have you done?" And here's the earthly wisdom I want us to think about for just a moment. Saul replied, "When I saw the men were scattering, my men were leaving, and I saw it, and that you didn't come at the set time, and the Philistines were assembling. So I saw that." And then he says, "I thought, now the Philistines are coming against me, and I haven't sought God's favor. And so it seems like the right thing to do. I thought it was the right thing to do." And so thirdly, he says, "I felt compelled to offer the burnt offering." And that's exactly what he did. He saw, he thought, and he felt. Earthly wisdom. Now, God can use all of those things. We can see certain things, and we can glean some wisdom from that. We can feel certain things. We can experience certain things that will help us feel certain things. But in the end, what is God's command? That is the heavenly wisdom. Proverbs says something very similar. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him. He will direct your paths. And then verse 7, do not be wise in your own eyes. There's our word. Do not be wise in your own eyes. What you see, what you feel, what you think. It makes sense to me. Don't be wise in your own eyes, but fear the Lord and shun evil. So that's the big difference between heavenly wisdom and earthly wisdom. So it's seeing life from God's perspective. Well, what did God say? It's not what do I think, what have I seen, what do I feel? It's what is God saying in this. That can have so many implications, so many applications in a dating relationship. What does God say about this? Not what do I feel, what do I see? In your home life, in your business, what is God saying about this? That's what's priority in this. So what is God's perspective? Here's the second thing that we see about wisdom, and that is it's the knowledge of God applied. So it's seeing life from God's perspective, and then it's the knowledge of God applied to life. Because it's not just about what you know. It's about how do I apply what I know to life around me. It says here in the scripture that we just read, wisdom comes down from heaven. But then that wisdom that comes down from heaven is supposed to get displayed on earth. Verse 13, it says, who has wisdom and understanding, let him show it. Let him show it by his good life, by deeds done in humility. Somebody said that wisdom is not degrees on the wall. Wisdom is feet on the ground. And so you can have wisdom from heaven, but it's got to get applied to life. That's what wisdom is. It's the application of this knowledge that God is giving me. And then thirdly, so wisdom is seeing life from God's perspective. It's the knowledge of God applied to my everyday life. And then finally, that it's God's perspective applied to life, especially, and this is what this text is really about, especially in the area of relationships. Because as you read this text, these 6 verses or so, what do you see? We see words like envy and ambition and disorder. That's on the negative side. And then we see words like submission and mercy and peace on the positive side. All of that is about relationship. So it's God's perspective applied to my life with the people around me. That's what really we're trying to gain here in terms of wisdom. All right, so those are the 3 areas. All right, perspective from above. Can you just say that with me? Perspective from above. And then applied to life. Say that with me. Applied to life. In relationships. Say that with me. In relationships. That's wisdom. Let me see if I can picture this. How many of you guys watched the Super Bowl this past Sunday? All right. So let's see if we can picture this. Those 3 areas of wisdom. So you got the Super Bowl. It is there's about 7 minutes on the clock. Kansas City Chiefs are down by 10. It looks like game over. In fact, on the ESPN chart, when you look at the percentage of who's going to win at Kansas City is way down. In other words, the 49ers are at 83% with about 7 minutes to go. 83% chance that the 49ers are going to win. It's 3rd down and 15. The Chiefs have the ball. 3rd down and 15. The Chiefs have the ball on their own 35-yard line. 7 minutes to go. Losing 20-10. And then what happens? There's a perspective. There's a coach up above, sitting high above, in a booth, calls a play. I'm thinking this is what we've got to do. The offensive coordinator, this is the call that we're going to play. He sees from above. It gets relayed down below. I don't know if this is actually how it happened, but I'm kind of making this up so that it fits my illustration. So he calls the play from above. And then what happens? It's got to be applied to life. So the call comes in, Mahomes gets the call, and he calls the play. And there's an application, and they know this play. They've run this play many times. They know exactly what they're supposed to do. But it's all about relationship. And so now you've got 11 players who hear the call from above. It gets relayed to them, and there are 11 guys that have 11 different things they're supposed to do. And so the line is supposed to block these particular people, and the backs are supposed to do this, and the quarterback is supposed to do this, and the wideouts are supposed to do this. And all 11 people are applying this information all at once. And then, if you're a Kansas City Chief fan, it's a beautiful thing because 44 yards down the field, Mahomes hits Hill, and now they are back in the football game. Ended up winning the football game. That's wisdom from above. It comes from above. Does that make any sense? Do you think I'm just wanting to talk about the Super Bowl? I'm thinking it makes sense. There's something from above. It gets applied in real time, but it relates to all of us. Now think about how this works maybe in your family. What's God's perspective on this? You're in an argument, you're in a situation, things are not working out. What is God's perspective in this? How does that then get applied into my life and into this situation and into our relationship? That is wisdom. That is exactly what is happening here. Same as for church. Church life, what is God's perspective in this? What is He saying about this? And then how is that supposed to get applied in my life, and how does it relate to all of us? That is wisdom. And when we see that work, whether it's in home or church or your place of work or school or wherever that would be, it's a beautiful thing. And so if you're taking notes, this is the first point, is the beauty of wisdom. It's the beauty of wisdom. So what does that mean? Why do we come up with the beauty of wisdom? We see a football play, and it could be defined as a beautiful thing. Look at all of these people that did different things. It's a beautiful thing, especially if you're a Chiefs fan. But the beauty of wisdom, the Greek word in and this is where this comes from, the Greek word in verse 13, for good, how many of you have wisdom and understanding? Who among you has wisdom and understanding? Let him show it by his, what does it say? By his good life. Let him show it by his good life. Now this word for good is the Greek word kalos. And the word means beautiful. The word actually means beautiful. So who has wisdom and understanding among you? Let him show it by his beautiful life. By his beautiful life. Let me see if I can picture this a couple of different ways. In Proverbs chapter 21, verses 3 and 4, it's pictured in the beauty of a home. By wisdom a house is built, and through understanding, there's our two words. By wisdom a house is built, and through understanding it is established. Through knowledge its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures. So wisdom gets displayed in beauty. And we've seen this. We've seen this as we redid the facility. Somebody with the talent, the ability, the wisdom, who knows what they're doing, it turns out to be a beautiful project. That's what we're talking about with relationship. That's what wisdom is. There's beauty in right relationship. Here's another example of this. In Luke chapter 21, verse 5, the disciples are enamored, they're amazed at the temple. And in another gospel, they're talking about, wow, look at the massive stones, they say to Jesus. Amazing. In Luke chapter 21, verse 5, they say this. Some of the disciples were remarking about how the temple was adorned with beautiful, and there's our word, kalos, that the temple was adorned with beautiful stones and with gifts dedicated to God. Wisdom has a beauty about it. It's glorious. It's beautiful. It's precious in a sense. So I take all of that to say this, is that in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 5, it says, we are living stones, built into a spiritual house. So if a house can be beautiful by its wisdom and how it's developed and filled, and if a temple can be beautiful by the wisdom in which it's displayed or in which it's built, then the spiritual house is to be the same. It's to be beautiful. Let wisdom be displayed in beauty, in how we relate to one another. Like a spiritual house, we are stones stacked on one another, side by side, displaying the beauty of God. This is the picture that James is trying to give us. God's perspective applied to human relationship is a beautiful thing, and here's why. Here's why it's beautiful. Because number one, it's grace-filled. It's grace-filled. Notice in verse 14 the words bitter envy. And that gets replaced in verse 17 with people full of mercy. So these stones, you take out the bitter envy, you replace it with people who are full of mercy, and all of a sudden there's beauty. It's grace-filled. Or think of the word selfish ambition in verse 14. That gets replaced, that stone gets replaced by selfish ambition. And now it's put in with words like submission and consideration of one another in verse 17. That creates beauty. Who has wisdom and understanding? Let him show it by the beautiful life that we live together. That's what James is teaching us. It's a grace-filled beauty. But it's also a peace-filled beauty. Instead of disorder, in verse 16, we see the words disorder and evil practice. You stack these stones of evil ambition and selfish or bitter envy and selfish ambition. You stack those, and now there's chaos, there's disorder. But then you replace that with purity and peace and submission and impartiality and sincerity. And now there's peace. So this is why it's beautiful. I want us to think about how this works in an area that might relate. We've talked about a building. 1 Corinthians chapter 12 talks about a body and how they connect and relate and how it can be a beautiful thing when the body works together. I want you to think of this in terms of music for just a moment. I've just been thinking about this throughout the week and how a movie without music is sort of lifeless. Have you ever watched something and then you just take out the soundtrack and it's like, man, this is really dull. But you put in the soundtrack and all of a sudden there's beauty that wasn't there. It's a completely new dimension to the movie. Tonight, we will watch, if you choose to do so, the Oscars, the Academy Awards are tonight. And one of the categories as these awards are given is the Best Original Musical Score. And so I just looked it up. Here are the nominees for Best Original Musical Score. The nominees are Joker, Star Wars, 1917, Marriage Story, and Little Women. And I want us to take about 60 seconds just to feel this for a moment. I don't know if this is going to work or not, but I want us to try. And I want us to get a sense of what is it like when instrumentation comes together and it brings something to life. And so to make this work, for example, you've got a symphony of 100 musicians playing 4 different kinds of instruments. You've got woodwinds, brass, percussion, and strings. And they all come together to do something beautiful to bring it to life, much like what James is telling us is supposed to happen in the church. So for about a minute, I just want us to think and to contemplate and to listen as to how this works in a musical way. So can we just go ahead and play that? This is from Little Women, in a scene from Little Women. Let's just listen. Close your eyes if you'd like to. All right, thank you. I don't know if that was a minute or not, but do you get the idea? All of these instruments coming together, there's no competition. No bitter envy, like, one person playing this instrument over here saying, I just wish they wouldn't play the instrument over here. I'm envious of that. Or there's no competition, there's no selfish ambition. It's all going towards one thing, the instrumentation. And what does it do? There's no disorder, but there's pure instrumentation. Everyone relating to one another, submitting to one another, so that it is grace-filled, peace-filled, and it makes for beauty, the beauty of wisdom. That is the picture of church. That is the picture that James is describing here for us, the beauty of wisdom. Let's just quickly talk about the key to wisdom. So if this is going to happen, how does that work? And there's a single word in this passage that makes this come to life. There's one word, this is the key to make wisdom beautiful. And so if you want greater wisdom and beauty in your home, if we wanted greater wisdom and more beauty in this church or your workplace or wherever the case may be, there is one word that makes this happen. The key to wisdom, and it's in verse 13. Scripture says, who among you is wise and understanding? Let him show it by his good life. By what? By deeds done in what? Humility. By deeds done in humility. Would you just say that word, humility? Humility. That is the key. That is the one key that makes this work. The Greek is PR for humility, is P-R-A-Y-T-E-S, prautes. And here is the meaning. Mildness of disposition, gentleness of spirit, meekness. The way one commentary put it, it's a word used in non-biblical literature, in Greek non-biblical literature, to describe a horse that's been broken and brought under control. It has power, but power under control. That is the key to making beauty of wisdom work. Humility. And James gives us 2 approaches to how to do relationships in this text. 2 kinds of wisdom. So we've looked at this, but let's just kind of quickly look at it again. There's one kind of wisdom that comes from below. We've talked about that, verse 15. It's earthly, it's unspiritual, it's of the devil. But here's the thing. All of that means that it's steeped in pride. It's steeped in who I am. In verse 14, we see, don't boast about it. Like if this is you, if there's bitter envy and selfish ambition, don't boast about it. The word is arrogance. Don't be arrogant about it. That is the earthly, unspiritual, of the devil kind of wisdom. It's pride. And James says that it's of the devil. Ezekiel 28 gives us an image of Satan and what it looks like. Listen to this scripture. Your heart was filled with pride. Your heart was filled with pride because of all your beauty. Your wisdom was corrupted. Your wisdom was corrupted by your love of splendor. So wisdom is corrupted by pride. And now it's unspiritual and it's earthly. It's of the devil. This is the so-called kind of wisdom that wants power. It's driven by envy and ambition. It's all about self. It's all about being partisan, divisive, choosing sides. It's rooted and steeped in pride. That's one kind of wisdom that James talks about. Here's the second kind of wisdom that comes from above, from heaven, and it's defined by the words in verse 17. It's pure, peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy, good fruit, impartial, and sincere. And this is the kind of wisdom that's steeped in humility. In humility. Let him show his wisdom by deeds done in humility. And I think that we can take this phrase literally. Because it says here that when James says this wisdom comes down from heaven, that's a clue to us that this kind of wisdom is embodied by Jesus Christ who came down from heaven. This is a picture of who Jesus is. Pure, peace-loving, considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. And so if you're wondering, who is Jesus? That's Him. He came down from heaven, and He's to live inside of me so that I am those things as well. It's a picture of humility. And it's demonstrated, we read this text often. And some of you can quote it, but in Philippians chapter 2, verses 6 through 8, it's this picture of Jesus coming from heaven. Though Jesus was God, He didn't think of equality with God as something to cling to. Instead, He gave up His divine privileges. He took the humble position of a slave. He was born a human being. And when He appeared in human form, He humbled Himself in obedience to God and died a criminal's death on a cross. And so are you in conflict? Are you struggling with relationship? The key to bringing and restoring beauty to that relationship, the number one key, the only key, is humility. It's humility. It's not about me. How do I serve you? How do I love you? Where do I need forgiveness from you? It's humility. This is the beauty. This is what brings the beauty back. So the big question then is, how do I get humility? Do I just work it up? Do I just fake it? Yeah, I'm just going to be more humble. There's something better. Because you don't get humility by looking at yourself. You get it by looking at God. Proverbs chapter 9, verse 10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is understanding. The only way, if the key to beauty in relationships is found in humility, the only way to humility is to have a healthy fear and awe of who God is. Several years ago, I was with my boys, and we were headed back from Arizona. We'd been in Phoenix, and I think Amy flew back, so it was just the three guys, and we were really trying to make time and get back to Fort Collins quickly. And it's like a 15-hour drive, and so it was even longer because we wanted to go by the Grand Canyon. And I think we had a rental car. I can't remember exactly the circumstances. I just know we had to get back to Denver in time. I think it was a rental car, and we had to hurry and get back so it's not another day of, another day's rental fee. So we're cooking just to get to the Grand Canyon as fast as we can, and we get there, and no kidding, it's like we all got out of the car, we looked at it like, here's the Grand Canyon, and it was like, man, this is amazing. Okay, guys, let's get back in the car and let's go. No fear, no awe, no respect. Like, let's just take a moment. Amazing. Because what does it do? Nobody gets to the Grand Canyon and looks out and says, check me out. Look at me. I'm pretty amazing. Nobody does that. What do? You get to the Grand Canyon and you're like, God, you are amazing. Look at who you are. It brings humility to you, doesn't it? This is what, when we come before God, so I need humility. Relationships can be screwed up, and what do? They're not beautiful. I want them to be beautiful. The only key to that is humility. Where do I get humility? I come before God, and I say, God, how amazing you are. Look at the forgiveness you've given to me. Look at who you are. When I was running away from you, look what you did. You died on the cross for me. Look at how great you are. You're so merciful and kind. Day by day, your mercies are new for me. And I live in this, and I bask in this, and I stay in this place like I'm just not leaving the Grand Canyon. And I'm changed. And I'm humble. And I experience that. And it makes me different on the inside. The beauty of wisdom, and then it leads us to the key of wisdom, which is humility. And finally, then there's the fruit of wisdom. In verse 18, it says, peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. These people who live with the beauty of wisdom by humility, they become peacemakers. And it says they sow in peace. This is the way that they do. They drop peace in people's lives. And as a result, they reap a harvest of righteousness, which I think would be right relationships. And it spreads. And you drop a seed, and there's growth. And you drop another seed, and there's more growth. And before you know it, you've got a church filled with a harvest of righteousness, or a family filled with harvest of righteousness. Pride leads to disorder. Humility leads to peace. In other words, when there is an environment of humility, when there's an environment of humility, then there's a harvest of righteousness and right relationships. Example would be that there are certain environments that are conducive to physical growth of plants. My son was in Florida last semester for school, and he learned about something like 60 different varieties of plants in case he was ever in a developing country and trying to help people with their production. And so he was understanding all of these. None of these would grow in Colorado, especially during the winter months, but they were flourishing in Florida. And when there is an environment that's conducive and that is steeped in humility, it's fertile. It's like fertile soil and sun and water that brings a harvest of peace and righteousness. And so surely that's what God wants for Brad and for each one of us. I've been reading through the book of John, and in John chapter 17, verse 23, I close with this. It's my desire for City Park Church. May they experience such perfect unity. This is what we've been talking about. Wisdom, God's perspective applied to life and relationships, that they experience such perfect unity that the world will know that you sent me. Because people hear the music. And they walk into this place on a Sunday morning and they're checking out a church and they're wondering, what does this church sound like? We had some sound issues this morning, didn't we? Somebody mentioned the sound system crashed this morning, and so we were scrambling to try to get that right. And that creates disorder for a moment. And the same is true with our church. That God wants us to have the beauty of relationship, not just for internal purposes, not just because it creates peace, because He wants a harvest of righteousness. He wants people to hear the music outside of these walls. So that when we do things like City Park outreach for Easter egg hunt, and we gather together and we've got 100 people out there from City Park Church, and they're looking, it's like, man, these people actually seem to like each other. This is a beautiful sound. I want to be a part of that. That's John chapter 17. May they be in such close unity and love for one another. They are humble with one another. They care for one another. They're not competing with each other. They're elevating each other. God, let us be this kind of church. Let us be this kind of church for the sake of the gospel. Well, the text started with the question. James 3, verse 13. Who is wise? Who is wise and understanding among you? Who is that? Is that you? Is it me? Who is wise? Because this only works if it's all of us. And before you as a congregation, I want to say, I want this to be me. And if you want it to be you, would you pray it with me? Let's pray. And if you would like to bow, you can do it. If you want to get on your knees, I'm not doing this for show, but I am just saying, however you pray best, would you pray a prayer like this? God, restore the beauty in my world. God, restore the beauty of relationships around me. God in heaven, I long to see you do a new work, to bring beauty where there now is chaos and hardship and conflict. And so in this moment, dear God, with all of my heart, I humble myself before you. And would you give me the grace to humble myself before others where I need to? And to bow and to bend the knee. And instead of being steeped in pride with envy and ambition and doing it my way, to say, Lord, I humble myself, and I do so because of the great God that you are, who has loved me and forgiven me and given me grace over and over and over again. What a great God you are. And then you could pray this with me, Lord, by faith, I'm going to start planting seeds of peace in people's lives. And I'm going to trust you that as I plant those seeds of peace, that you're going to bring about a harvest of righteousness. You can only create the growth to that, but I can do my planting. And I want to plant from this day forward. I want to plant these seeds in my spouse. I want to plant these seeds in my children. I want to plant these seeds in my parents. I want to plant these seeds in the lives of my colleagues and those in this church. So help me to plant seeds of peace. And I'm going to trust you for a harvest of righteousness. Thank you for what you will do. In Jesus' name, amen.